Good evening, everyone. We are in the midst of Hilchot Borer, sorting, separating good from bad, bad from good, for immediate use, with the use of a utensil or by hand, all the different situations. We have a few more cases to go, quite a few. It's a long chapter. I think this is our third session on Borer. We said there'll be around 6. So after today, we'll have done halfway through. We've been halfway through. And before we continue, I spoke to Leah before. We said that we'll decide when we go off on short break vacation. If it's up to me, 2 more shiurim after this one are still possible till Tisha B'Av. So it depends on the group, the way they'd like to, when they'd like to break off. Meaning it's mainly going to be the month of August and a little bit of July, part of July. See as we go along. Maybe Leah will discuss with others, and we'll notify everyone before next week. Okay, so a case that we haven't yet discussed, a situation where you're actually you're separating bad from good, which is the wrong way to do on Shabbat. We normally don't do that. But in this case, you need dafka the bad. You want to use the bad and not the good. When would that be the case? For example, if you have an animal, a pet animal in your house, and you want to feed the animal, we're allowed, as the owner of an animal, we're allowed to feed our animals, our pets, on Shabbat. So let's say you've got a chicken, and it hasn't been eaten yet, meaning the flesh of the chicken is there, and it's edible to human beings. But, as we know, we're supposed to feed our animals before we eat ourselves. That's a halacha that is written in the Shulchan Aruch, based on the pasuk in Vayayim Shamoah, which we famously say twice a day, or maybe women once a day because they don't have a mariv. We say, "V'natati eser besadcha livemtecha ve'achalta ve'savata." So first, the pasuk says that there will be a supply of food for our animals, and then it says ve'achalta ve'savata, and then human beings eat. So for eating for food, solid food, our pets go first. The obvious reason for that is that we don't want to cause them suffering or hunger because of tsar ba'alei chaim. We want to make sure that we've taken care of everyone before we take care of ourselves. Otherwise, it's a little bit of a selfish act to eat first and let the animals or those around us to starve. By the way, drinking, it's the opposite. Drinking, you first drink yourself, and then you can supply drink for water to your animal. That we learned from Rivka when she supplies water for Eliezer, the servant of Avram, and his camels. So it says, "Shtei Adoni v'gam ligmalecha ashke." First drink yourself, and then I will supply water for your camels. So you see that by drinking, human beings go first. By eating solids, animals go first. Anyhow, so you would like to feed the animal before you go out and eat. If you're going to pull out the bone from the chicken, then you're actually separating bad from good. Normally, we eat off of the bone and we leave the bone on the plate instead of pulling out the bone before we start eating. We will get to the point later on, one of the cases in this chapter when we will discuss how we eat fish that is not filet, a piece of filet of fish which doesn't have bones in it. If we're having a whole fish which has bones in it, how do we eat that on Shabbat? That's a whole other issue. Because that's very dangerous to put the piece in your mouth with some small bones inside and then just pick them out. That's how we should have done it, to take good from bad, separate good from bad. But it's very dangerous to have that piece of fish in our mouth together with the bones. So we'll learn how to eat fish later on. Sure, I'll get to your question, Leah. Sorry, I didn't start with questions as we usually do. I'll get to your question soon, Leah. First, let's just finish this point here. So separating the bone from the chicken seemingly should not be allowed because it's bad from good. But the Pri Megadim, one of the greatest poskim we've had, Pri Megadim allows doing so. How come? Because he says, true, normally a bone is garbage, goes to the garbage, and therefore it's considered bad from good. But in this case, you want to use the bone for good. You want to use it to feed your dog. So since in this case you're pulling out what normally is considered bad, but in this case it's for immediate use, you want to feed your dog with it, so it's considered good from good or good from bad, whatever you want to call it, but it's taking out the good first, and therefore you're allowed. Some other poskim held, like the Ben Ish Chai, held that true that that's okay, but you have to make sure that everyone understands what you're doing. Imagine if someone sees you pulling out the bone from the piece of chicken, everyone who sees such a thing will all go, what are you doing? It's boring. How are they supposed to know that in this case specifically, you're pulling out the bone in order to feed a dog? So he says you have to make it noticeable. You have to make it obvious to anyone who sees you doing so that you're doing it properly. How do you do that? If the dog is right near you, so you're pulling out the bone and feeding it immediately, or at least you have the container, the bowl that is obviously seen and noticeable as a pet animal's bowl, then that's okay too. You're throwing it into the bowl. Everyone realizes what you're doing. But if you're just pulling out the bone and putting it aside somewhere, that's something that people may think that you're doing borer, and therefore you have to make it obvious. Rav Ovadia Yosef felt that this is an extra stringency. It's not written anywhere that when you do something properly, you have to be aware of the fact that maybe someone will think you're doing something wrong. Although there is a general concept of maritime, we're not supposed to do something that people may think that we're doing something wrong, but not always do we apply that. In this case, Rav Ovadia Yosef felt that you don't have to prove in an obvious way that you're doing it in order to feed your animal, and you can just pull out the bone, put it aside, and well, it has to be immediate, within half an hour or even an hour. Within the hour, you want to feed your dog, that's fine. Bottom line, if you can make it noticeable, better. If it's difficult, then never mind. And this also works in cases like we discussed in the past, where your children don't want to eat a certain part of the food in their plate and it's mixed with other things. You can pull out what they don't want to eat, providing it goes to someone else, an adult, who will eat that food. And you're allowed, because that's the same idea. For them, it's psolet. For them, it's bad. They don't want to eat it. But since you're pulling it out to feed someone else within the hour, then it's fine. And it's considered ochet. You're taking out good from good. And therefore, it's okay. Yes, Leah, you wanted to ask an off-topic question.
Yes, sorry. I actually have two. One is hopefully both very quick.
Yes.
First of all, is there a way to warm up dairy food on a meaty electric hot plate for Shabbat lunch?
Dairy
and
food,
the second,
you mean in...
Like if I eat dairy, like a quiche, let's say. A quiche.
Okay. It's in a container. It's in a
it will be a foil container. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes, you could do that, providing two things. A, the surface is clean of the hot plate. If it has actual meaty substance like oil, like crumbs, pieces of food, leftovers, then you cannot, because that...
I mean, nothing is ever directly on a hot plate anyway. It's always, I have the trays from the oven.
Aha, okay. So even the spillovers don't ever reach the hot plate itself.
I think I have like a spillover of something once, and there is like a stain that I could never get out after years and years and years. I have no idea what it was.
No, I'm not talking about that. That's no substance. No, I'm talking about substance, something that is of substance, not just a stain. So any spillovers you have to wipe away, if there are any. And second of all, you have to make sure that both surfaces are dry. The surface of the hot plate and the underneath surface of the Pyrex, the quiche or whatever the container it's in. Both surfaces have to be dry. No droplets, no water. And then from dry to dry, when it's from kli to kli, from utensil to utensil, they're both dry, there is no absorption of taste from one to the other.
So for example, if I put it,
yes.
If I put it on the tray, which comes from a meaty oven as well, because I only have one oven and I only Shavuos, maybe I'll kasher it and make it milky. So the tray to diffuse, not to put it directly so it doesn't look like cooking, can I use it as meaty, providing it's dry? I usually line it with foil anyway, so I don't get any spillovers and dirt on the trays, because then those are hard to clean.
Right. Yeah, perfectly fine. If they're clean and dry, fine. I would switch the tin foil lining to a new one. Obviously, you can't cut tin foil on Shabbat, but if you prepare it ahead of time, before Shabbat.
No, I normally do it all before Shabbat. I also have pre-cut tin foil I buy.
Pre-cut. Okay, perfect. So if you line it with new tin foil that wasn't the one that you had for the meaty foods, that's...
Oh, no, it's every week it's new tin foil.
Yeah, but it was used for the first two meals with
Oh,
meat.
you mean if I warm it up for the night before, let's say? Yeah, okay.
Right. Yes. Fine.
If I used it. Okay, so I need to swap over the tin foil. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, right. Okay, so that's good for that question. That's
and
fine.
Another quick question. This Shabbat, all of a sudden I went to turn on my blech and it wasn't working. Obviously it's like within almost 18 minutes of lighting candles, it's beginning, so I'm like, okay, there's nothing else I can do. I just grab my Pesach one and I plug that in.
Wow.
So now, is it easy to kasher my Pesach one and get my usual one fixed? Or
you mean a hot plate? You mean a plata?
Hot plate, yes.
Yeah.
Again, it wasn't nothing was directly on it. It was also on the upside on the oven trays, which were dry, lined with foil. Is there anything I will need to do now, or wait till Pesach and then I don't know?
It was lined with tin foil, which isn't enough for Pesach to be considered non-absorbent for Pesach. But
and now, if I don't use it now till Pesach, we're talking about Pesach, over 6 months.
Yeah, that still isn't enough, especially for Ashkenazim. But was there any spillover of any type while it was heating up the food, or it remained completely clean on the tin foil?
I did not see any spillover. No, I mean it's all was dry stuff on it, schnitzels, rice, kugels, but they were all wrapped in foil themselves.
No crumbs fell over or anything of that sort. So then you're okay. If you lined it with tin foil and there was no spillover, so again, dry to dry, the fact that all the foods were in containers, were in pots, pans, Pyrexes, and you had them, and they were dry surface, both the bottom of the pan and the top of the hot plate or the tin foil, then there's no absorption, even for Pesach stuff. If there was spillover of damp...
I'm wondering, my only thing is now, because I put challah on top.
Challah.
So crumbs from challah, that's the only thing I'm thinking. Maybe when you move the two large trays, maybe some of it went on the blech. I didn't see, but...
The challah was on top of what? On
top of like few layers of food, of tinfoil food.
A few layers of...
It was warming up on top of all the food that was layered up.
I get it.
So I had the hot plate, the two big oven trays, and everything sits in the oven trays that are lined, the oven trays on the inside.
But aren't you covering it for Pesach anyway, especially?
I have a separate one for Pesach, so I never bothered.
Right. Okay, so you're saying like this. You had, first of all, you line it with tin foil. On top of that.
No, I didn't line it with tin foil. On top of that, on top of that were the two trays trays are lined with tin foil. So the food doesn't come into contact with the trays.
Okay, I got it. So if there was any spillover or crumbs that may have fallen, they would not have fallen directly on the hot plate, rather on those racks or
trays.
Trays, yeah.
They're solid trays. They're not racks. They're like solid trays. That nothing.
Okay. So,
but I'm afraid because it's two trays and they could have slid in here, there as I was moving food. What if a couple of crumbs did fall?
Did fall on it? Wow. I would say like this: since you're not sure, or I would even put it this way: you didn't see any crumbs on the hot plate at any time during Shabbat. That's for sure. If you had seen, then you would know they fell. So you hadn't seen. It could have been that you didn't notice, but you didn't see. So it's suffix whether it all happened. And if it happened, and then it absorbed from the chametz taste, so then we have the Shulchan Aruch's opinion that if it's tam nifgam, if it's more than 24 hours with non-use, then it doesn't make the food of Pesach treif. The Ramah holds that it does, even if it's more than 24 hours or days and months of no use, it still has to be kosher. But you have the doubt whether bichlad it happened in the first place. So we have a double doubt. Besides that, what I would do is like this. I would clean it thoroughly. It should be clean because after all, you saw nothing on it. So it should be clean, but make sure it's clean and plug it in for maybe half an hour. Half an hour, empty of anything on it, nothing on it. That would do some type of koshering to it. That's called libun kal. If there was anything that got absorbed, and since again it's a double doubt whether it caused any issue, so by doing all that, by turning on for at least half an hour, even an hour if possible, that it gets really, really, really hot, and without anything over it or on it, then you can keep on using it on Pesach. It should be okay.
But I complicate things even more now.
Yeah.
What if I'm like thinking now? I usually put it on the stovetop, and I didn't wipe the stovetop from frying food before Shabbos. So from the bottom of it, it's not the top, but the bottom that comes into contact.
And the bottom is on legs. They have those small legs.
It has legs, but because I put it on the wire of the thing, the legs, the metal discs around each plate, what's it called? Each gas hob.
Yes.
Rests directly, I think, around the bottom metal of the thing. I don't think it's I think legs are too short, or they're pretty much the same. That it's I feel the balance is by the metal round of the gas stove.
The gas openings, yeah. Oh wow.
Okay, so is that really
filthy? Although, wait. Usually those round small plates they're usually clean actually. Why? Because anything that falls on them immediately burns away because the fire is there. Unless you have some remaining oil, crumbs, things of that sort that fell after the cooking or frying was done, and you didn't clean it away before Shabbat, so it actually touched those crumbs or oil. You think you can tell if they're clean or not? If you look at them now, They seem clean to you or not? Those.
I mean, we have used it since Shabbat, so it's hard to tell.
Aha.
Because it's not just me, my husband also uses, I mean, they are clean. It's just the bottom where the oil sprays, you know, when you fry it.
Yeah.
The bottom sort of has a bit of pepper, a couple of sort of oil. I fried schnitzels before Shabbat, and that's
right.
Probably the most problematic food you want to fry in matzah meal before Shabbat and put your Pesach blech on.
Yeah, right. Because you have breadcrumbs, I assume, on your schnitzel.
Yep.
Wow.
Okay, so I'm in trouble. It's not straightforward.
Right.
Even though it doesn't come into contact with food directly, it's from the bottom.
I know, but let me ask one more question. Do you know when you turn it out, you can check this easily. Plug it in, let it run for 10 minutes, let's say, and touch the underneath surface gently to see if it becomes hot. It may not at all become hot on the bottom, although I doubt, because the moment the top part gets hot and it's all like one piece of metal, top to bottom, then I assume the heat surrounds the entire hot plate. But if the bottom of the hot plate, after 10, 15 minutes or half an hour of work, does not get hot, if you can touch the surface of the bottom of it and it doesn't, you can keep your hand there for a minute, then there's no absorption because it's cold to cold. Cold to cold doesn't absorb. As long as you clean it thoroughly and well on the bottom, then there's not a problem either. If that underneath surface of the hot plate gets hot to a point of yad sorer, when you can't keep your finger on it for more than 15 seconds, let's say, then you're in trouble. Then I can't see a way to kasher it. You would have to make it a chametz hot plate, another one to use during the year, and you have to buy yourself a new one for Pesach. Or else you come with thick tin foil on Pesach, thick tin foil, not the one layer of the thin type. The thick tin foil, after you run it for an hour, like we said before, all cleaned out and run it for an hour, empty of everything, and then cover it with thick tin foil. Then you can use the chametz one for Pesach. So it becomes thick if the bottom of the if the bottom part of the hot plate gets hot when you turn it on for more than half an hour, for half an hour, let's say.
So if I do this year, I will. If I do it this year with tin foil, I mean, if my hot plate can't be replaced, I will fixed. I will just use this one. But if it does get fixed, I can use this one with thick foil this year, and then next year I don't have to use foil, right? Because it's been over a year there hasn't been.
You're right that there is such an opinion of the Chacham Tzvi. He's a big postic rabbi who was living 300 years ago approximately. And here he reached this conclusion that after a year of no use, there's no more absorption of the taste. It goes away, it evaporates, and you can use anything of the different type. Let's say if you have meaty and a whole year goes by without using it, you can use it for milchik and vice versa. The problem is that he's the only one who says so. All other poskim, as far as I know, many poskim disagree with him, and they say it doesn't matter, year, 10 years, 15 years, it doesn't matter.
I think Chabad also go by a whole year.
They follow the year?
I think so.
1 year? I haven't heard that. You can ask a Chabad rabbi if you know one. If you know, ask halachas. It has to be a person who's knowledgeable in halacha, obviously. So, posek of Chabad, then you can ask him. If it's true and you want to follow that opinion, then fine. You have to follow. If it's only the Chacham Tzvi himself, it's difficult to follow because, as far as I know, most poskim disagree, and they would have to always cover your hot plate with tin foil, thick tin foil every year. But that's all providing the bottom surface gets hot if it's turned on for, let's say, half an hour. Check how that works. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Okay, back to Borer. Next case. What happens if, let's say, we have a pile of chumashim or sidurim, or a pile of books in our home? Chumashim sidurim would be in the shul, most probably. Sometimes at home we also have piled up books, and we want to choose a book from inside, from within the pile that we want to use dafka that one. Let's say you have chumashim of different types, an art scroll chumash, and a Oz Vehadar chumash, and one with English, one without English, all kinds of different chumashim, all stacked up in a pile. And you want to reach and take one out from the pile and read and use it for the reading of the Torah when the minyan gets to the Torah reading. That is not allowed. Why not? Because right now that it's all in one pile, it's all considered a mixture of chumashim, or the sidurim all piled up with Koren, Rinat Yisrael, Tfilat Kol Peh, all the different types, and you want to reach from within the pile and take one siddur out, the one you prefer using. So, but the problem is it's not for immediate use. The chumash will be used only in half an hour from now when the congregation gets to the Torah reading. If you're right, if you had come to shul right at that point when they're ready for Torah reading, then fine. That's immediate. But if it's going to take them another half hour or more, that's already not considered so much immediate. So you would have to actually leave your seat and go over to the pile before they reach Torah reading, a few minutes before, and then reach out for that specific chumash you want to use from within the pile. Siddur is more permissible because the siddur you're probably using immediately. So you're taking good from bad, you're sorting the one you like from the ones you prefer not to use for immediate use with your hand. That's fine. But anything that's done for later on is not. Even if you're about to leave your home and it'll take you more than half an hour to begin davening, you can't reach for the one you'd like from within the pile to take to shul. Because it's the use that counts, it's not the preparation for use. And by sorting it out in your house to use for later on in shul, that's not considered immediate use. Unless it's within half an hour. How can you, after all, take the one that you'd like? So there is the idea, we mentioned several times, of kolef. When you have something surrounding something that you can't reach to what you want, you're allowed to remove the outside layer, like you're allowed to peel the orange in order to get to the orange, even though you're removing bad from good, but that's in order to reach the inside. So if you don't pull out the one you'd like, that's borer. That you're taking one, you're separating one from the pile. Rather, you remove the entire top part of the pile away from the Siddur Chumash that you would like to reach to get to. By that, you're sort of peeling away what's bothering you to get to the one to get to the actual book you're looking for, and then you can pick it up from the top and take it. But the Rav Phil Malka in the book here that we're using, he mentions that this is only true b'tnai she'chumash chafetz bo yeh acharon b'arima. He doesn't allow this if it's from the midst of the pile. Even removing the top part to get to the middle section, to get to the middle one, that's still not allowed. Because after all, you're separating that top one from the ones underneath it. The top part, the top 4 or 5 of them that you put aside, that's called kolef. That's you're just peeling away, sort of speaking, the surrounding non-desirable books now. But okay, so you got to the one you want to use, but that one you want to use is still in a pile because it's within all the ones that are underneath it. And the ones underneath it aren't bothering you now in any way to get to the one you'd like because it's on top. But if you take the one you'd like from on top, you're separating it from the rest of the pile, which is again borer. So he says the only way that you can really get to the book you'd like is only if it's at the very bottom of the pile. If the chumash or siddur or book you're looking for is at the very bottom of the pile, then you can remove. You can still not pull out the one you'd like. You can't do that, but you can remove all the books that are on top of it. The 10 books on top you can put aside in order to reach the one you'd like. That's called kolef. So it's a little bit counterintuitive to what we would have thought, because this way you're dealing with the bad. You're taking away what you don't want. You're removing what you don't want and reaching what you do, instead of taking what you want away from what you don't want. Normally, we would say take the good from bad. But in this case, if you do that and it's not for immediate use, you're doing borer. On the other end, if you're removing all the bad away because it's bothering you to reach what you want to get to, that's not called bor at all. That's called kiluf. It's not like picking out a stone of the lemon that fell into the salad. That's not bothering you to get to the salad. You can eat around it. Say you're not allowed to do in no case. Here, all the pile on top is bothering you to reach the book you'd like. So anything that's bothering you to reach, it's like surrounding it. That's kolef. That's called peeling away, and it's not called borer. And then you're allowed to remove that whole pile and get to what you'd like to use. That's not considered borer. Okay. By the way, Rav Ovadia Yosef is more lenient about all of this because he bases his halacha on a few points that altogether, putting them all together, makes it more permissible in general to deal with books or toys of this sort. His idea is that there are opinions who say that there's no borer with regards to anything that doesn't grow from the ground. That's a whole other lenient opinion, that anything that's not fruits or vegetables, there's no borer. No issue of borer at all. We don't follow that opinion. Otherwise, we could have solved all these cases in a second. Take any book you'd like, take any toy you'd like, put away any cutlery you'd like and separate them into their compartments. Everything is fine as long as it's not something that grows from the ground. So we don't follow that opinion at all. But he combines several opinions to make it more lenient. So one is this opinion. The other is the fact that in these type cases, many times the books are so obviously different from one another. You have a pile, so you can easily tell, let's say there's a color that is the Koren Siddur versus a different color that are the Rinat Yisrael Siddurim. So you can obviously tell the difference. If it's just to read the small letters to tell which Siddur it is, then it's not obvious. But if it's very obviously different one from another, then it's not considered a Ta'arovit. It's not considered a mixture. This we mentioned when we said that Rav Ovadia Yosef is also leaning to about cutlery, to put away forks, knives, spoons in their compartments, he allows. Because even if they're all bunched together after they've dried from washing them, he says that still you can easily distinguish between knives, forks, spoons that are in the pile. So it's not considered boring. So that's also true by books, providing they are easily distinguishable one from another. And another point that he uses, now this is not true in the case of wanting to use one of the books, like we said before, wanting to use the Chumash or a Siddur for prayer. He says it for putting them away. What happens if you have a whole pile of books and you want to put them away? So we said we can't do that because that's also sorting. Put things away, sorting them, you're putting them in place. Instead of them being a mess, you want to put them in place. That's sorting. That's boring. Says Rav Ovadia, but since you don't want to use any of them right now, You're putting them away. You're not taking one to use and the rest put away. You're putting everything away. That's not considered good from bad or bad from good. It's separating between two goods which aren't going to be used right now. That's not borer. Borer has to involve good and bad, even if it's not objectively good and bad. It's not garbage and food. But if you want to use one and not the others, the one you want to use is considered good. The ones you don't is considered like bad. But in this case, you're not going to use this nor that. All the books on the table you want to put back in place, you're not going to use any of them. For now, you can use them a day later or 2 days later. For now, you're not using any of them. That's not considered borer. That's the opinion of the Pri Megadim. The Mishnah Berurah disagrees. He says if they're good, two goods that are not going to be used now, still separating them is considered borer. Therefore, we can't place toys back into their compartments or utensils, cutlery into its place, forks, knives, spoons. We can't put them back in place, even though we're not going to use them right now for any of them for now, but still it's good from good. That's considered, sorting them is considered boring. But again, Rav Ovadia Yosef takes all these opinions together and allows putting back books in place. Whoever follows Rav Ovadia Yosef can do that. Those who don't, normally, like Ashkenazim. So for most poskim, it's not allowed. The only thing is that if you have a whole pile stacked up of books, you want to put them back in place, there is a way to do so after all, even not according to Rav Ovadia Yosef. And what is that? If you just randomly pick out a book from with the top, each book on top, you pick it up, put it in place. Pick it up, put it in place. Poskim allowed doing so because you're not picking and choosing which book to put in place. You're not from within the pile pulling out certain books and putting them in this shelf and certain books in that shelf. Whatever comes out on top, as you go down the pile, each one on top you pick up and put in place. That's okay.
But they also apply to toys?
Oh, so if you recall, we mentioned from the Shmira Shabbos Kilchasa that for some reason, it's not clear to me exactly why this only applies to books. Rav Phil Malka told me once that the difference is that books have their separate exact location in the library, whereas toys and cutlery, they have different compartments, but it's not that you only have one choice to put it into. I wasn't sure exactly what he meant.
I mean, we have boxes. So my son's Paw Patrol toys go in one box. His Octonauts toys in the other. Kitchen things in a third box. My
Lego.
daughter's Barbie things in a Lego, exactly.
Right.
There are only, there is one miscellaneous box, which is just like random things.
Right.
Everything else, like cars go with cars, animals go with animals, train track with train track.
Very nice. Well,
so my books are more mixed up than my toys.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what the answer is. I don't know why, but in the Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa, he allows doing so for books, and he does allow doing so for toys and cutlery. For cutlery, we said that if they're still dripping wet, so you can just take out one, whatever comes out first, without choosing dafka, a fork or a knife or a spoon. Take out one, dry it, and the moment you're drying it, so you haven't really taken it out in order to put it in place, rather to dry it. And now that it's in your hand alone, separate from the pile, then you can put it into its compartment. That's how we can, after all, sort out the cutlery and put it in the drawer in the right compartments. But for toys, there's nothing you can do with a toy besides putting it back in place. You're not going to dry it from anything or do anything of that sort. So toys, he does not allow putting back in place. Books, he does. So I don't know exactly the difference. But again, books, only if you take randomly whatever is on top and you go down the pile, you can put them in place. So I would use it only for books. If you want to be extra stringent and not even rely on the Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa to allow books to sort them in place. And so I do this personally because I feel that otherwise I'm cheating and really putting back in place and it's sorting and it's a borer, so I'm afraid of that. What I do is I pick up the first book on top, I learn a line from in a moment. I read one line, and that's like drawing by the cutlery. Because if I take it to read a line, then I'm taking it to use. I use the book now. And now that I've used it, it's in my hand separate from the pile because it's in my hand now away from the pile. And now I can put it back into place. Anytime you have like a station in between the sorting action, then it's okay. Because you haven't lifted it up in order to sort. You lifted it up in order to read. And then it happens to be alone in your hand, you can put it back into place. That's a trick you can do. Now for toys, even that doesn't work too well. Let's say you've got the whole mess of animals and cars and Lego all around in the room. You want to pick out now the animals, put them in the box, in the animal box. Then the Lego, put in Lego box, and each type, the cars in the car box. What can you do when you lift up, let's say, an animal? What can you do with it now before you put it into place? Are you going to give it a hug to make use of it before you put it into place? It doesn't make sense. You can pick out a car, have your kid play with it a second, half a minute, let's say, to roll it around on the floor, and then take it from him and put it into place. That, yes, because you've picked it out from the mess in order for it to be used as a game. And now that it's used as a game, you can put it into place. I know it's trick. It's like playing a trick, but that's allowed. We said that's allowed by cutlery, so you can do it for everything else. But it doesn't work too well for toys because what are you going to do? Have him play with each and every toy for half a minute and then take it from his hand and put it into the box? It's a big nuisance to do it that way. So for toys, there isn't a good solution to tidy up the room after it's become a mess. What you can do in advance is ask your children, please play with one type of toys at once and don't mix it with other types, or in different areas of the room, play with the dolls in this side of the room, play with the cars in that side of the room, and don't mix them all together. Or finish playing with the cars, put them back in place, and then take a different type of toy. The moment they're not mixed together, there's no mixture, so you can put them back in place. Although you have to be aware also of hachana. Besides borer, which is the Doraita level, there is the issue of not preparing from Shabbat to a weekday. You mustn't prepare. And if you're just tidying up a room at the end of Shabbat, then that's really preparing for a weekday. So if it's done in the beginning of the Shabbos day or midday, then you could say that it's making the room tidy for Shabbat itself. You don't like the atmosphere of a messy room on Shabbat itself. But if it's towards the end of Shabbat, and you're not really going to use that room till after Shabbat, then you can't really tidy up the room because of a chana, let alone borer. That's even if it's not a mixture. You have only cars in the room now, and you want your children to put them back in place. You can't ask them to do so because that's hachana. You're preparing from Shabbat to a weekday. So in general, it's not easy to tidy up the room. Many times we have guests that come over, or
the vice versa. When you actually go as a guest, I would feel horrible after my kids spending all afternoon lunch playing with somebody's toys and leaving a balagan.
Leaving it a mess.
I can't even clean it up.
That's exactly what I was getting to. Exactly, I was getting to that point. Right, or you have guests over and they feel horrible leaving without tidying up. So normally what we say to them, leave it, we'll take care of it. But people don't like doing that, you're right. Problem. Only in advance I don't know, it's hard to even ask, if you're invited somewhere else, it's hard even to ask of your host not to bring out different types of toys at once, rather bring out only Kapla or Lego, play with that, finish playing with that, put it back, take out a different type, play with that, finish that, take a different type. That would be the best way when they don't get mixed all together. Otherwise, if they bring out different types of toys and they all get mixed together, problem. I can't see a way of helping them to tidy up. You could tell them, don't touch this mess. Motzei Shabbat, I'm coming over and I'll help you tidy it up. Of course, that will work and it won't happen, but it's a nice way of offering, at least, suggesting to help. Otherwise, I can't see a way. You're right. This came up in my mind this moment as we're talking. And I see you also had that question later immediately as we were talking.
But if you're talking about good from bad, if you're saying that, like when you're putting them away, if you could say, well, at the moment, I only want the dolls. So for me to get to like the cars are that, I don't know, I feel like.
So that's even worse. If you do that, it's even worse because you're going to put away the cars because you want to play only with the dolls. So you're taking bad from good.
No, so I'm saying I only want the dolls. So no, I want to put away the dolls. Like for me, I don't know. I feel like
it's not using it. Putting away using is when you want to use it as a game.
Can you scatter them across the room without touching each other and then put them away, kick them away, and that way they're not in a one bundle, they're just entire room is covered.
Correct. You're right. Excellent. That's our usual trick with all the other things we discussed in the past. Exactly. That's a great idea. I didn't think of it at this moment. Perfect idea. Scatter them.
Can you repeat that?
Room. What's that?
Can you repeat that? I don't.
Yes, I'll repeat what Leah just said. We said several times, anything that has to do with borer is only when it's all in a pile, all like a mess, all together, looks like a mixture of things. The moment they're separate from one another, there's no issue of borer. How do you do that with toys and games? You toss around the room that the kids will love doing. Tell your kids.
Right, but I think that's anyway a playroom after a Shabbat day. After a Shabbat, half the toys are all around the house, but it's not like they're not all in a pile. It's
so like, that's fine. If they're not touching each other, then it's not considered a mixture. But if some of it is mixed together, some of the toys are mixed together. So you take the whole pile, and toss it around the room. Just throw it around the room so that nothing now is mixed together. It's a mess. It's a holy mess. But the room is a mess, there's no pile of toys that make up the mess. It's just separate toys all over the room. That's not a mixture. And then you can pick and choose anything you'd like to gather. Oh, I see Julia just fell. Oh, here she is. You're back, Juliet? Yes, okay. So I'm saying the moment in the room when they're not touching each other, so you can pick and choose any toy you'd like and put it in place. Because the whole issue of borer is only when it's in a mixture. Only a mixture of things cannot be separated. But when they're not a mixture, because they're all separate one from another, you can tidy up as much as you'd like in any way you'd like, because it's not an issue of borer at all. Because the borer only begins when there's a mixture.
Okay.
That's a great solution. Again, according to Avad Yosef, these issues may be a little bit more lenient because of all those leniencies that he based his psak on. But for Ashkenazi, we don't follow that because most rabbis disagreed with his concept. So I wouldn't use it to begin with. I would use this trick of tossing them all over the room. It may seem very weird to your hosts if your guest is someone's home, or to your guests if they're by you and they want to help you tidy. You can say to them, "I'm sorry, but there's a problem with borer here," and then you're going to toss everything around the room. It may seem very awkward, very weird to people who aren't unaware of halachic issues like these. But what can you do?
Are you able to gently kick them instead of tossing? Sort of like gently kick the pile, let them sort of. It's a little bit less invasive. People don't look like when toys fall all over, especially hard toys. You don't want anything to bash anything, make dents in the hard food floors or whatever else people have in the house.
Right. Yeah, kicking is also fine. Any way you'd like to separate them one from another, even with your hand, you can just like sort of push them aside one from another. The moment you're pushing them away one from another, they're not muktzeh, obviously. The toys are muktzeh. And the fact that you're separating a pile from you're separating pieces one from another. You're not separating them into place, but you're separating one from another. They shouldn't be touching each other. With your hand, that's also fine. Because you're not sorting it, you're just separating. You're just making them not in a pile anymore. So even with your hands gently, you can spread them aside from each other, spread them slowly, gently away from each other. And the moment all the toys are away from one another, then start picking them up one by one and choosing. You can even pick and choose which toys you'd like to pick up first, put them all in place, and then pick up a different type of toy, put them in place. The moment they're not touching it, it's no longer a pile, it's no longer a mixture, and now you can separate whatever and then you can sort anything you'd like. Yeah, so that's a very, very good solution. This is a way to teach people, if you're hosts or hosted by, your guest at someone's home, it's a beautiful way to teach people halacha. You can explain to them. Otherwise, we're doing borer because we're sorting a pile, even though it's good from good, and they're both not going to be used now. Even so, it's borer. Not according to the Pri Megadim, but according to Mishnah Berurah Bir Halacha, and that's who we follow. So we mustn't sort things in place unless they're not in a pile. So let's now break the pile up that nothing is touching each other, and then we can pick and choose whatever we'd like to put in place. Again, providing there are enough hours for Shabbat that will not exterminate within the next few minutes, that it's not considered preparing from Shabbos to weekday, because you would like the living room, dining room area to look normal for the rest of the Shabbat. So you're preparing for Shabbat itself. You're cleaning up for the Shabbat itself and not just for after Shabbat. If you're having someone over for Seudah Shlishit and it's half an hour before Shabbat ends and you finish the meal and you want to fix up the room, then you cannot do that. Not because of borer, but because of a chana, preparing for a weekday. So we take into consideration all these halachic discussions, and it turns out very interesting. Okay, very good. This was a new piece for me as the shiur was developing today. This whole issue of putting back toys. It's something that many, many, many people stumble over on Shabbat, and it could be, to a certain extent, and sometimes in certain ways, d'oraita level of a prohibition. Imagine, it's like if you tell someone, if you do this, it's as if you're cooking on Shabbat. They'll say, what are you, crazy? Cooking on Shabbat? That's a no situation, no way. And this, I'm just putting back toys in place. So although there are lenient opinions, like we said, the Pri Megadim, we said the Rav Yosef, it's not as powerful as cooking on Shabbat. But according to those poskim who disagree with Rav Yosef and Pri Megadim, it's like cooking on Shabbat. It's the right level. Imagine how important this halacha is, and how this specific case, which we just came up with, can be very frequently transgressed, chas v'chalila, by ignorance. Okay, let's go on to another example. This is something we've done about soaking leafy vegetables like lettuce and all of those sort, soaking them in soap and water in order to clean them away from bugs or dirt, sand, and things of that sort. So we said like this: washing and rinsing them under the tap is fine. That we don't call borer, we call that cleaning. We're not separating, we're cleaning the leaves. But to soak them in water is considered borer, because that we're separating bad from good, because the water causes the bad, the bugs or the sand to separate from the leaves, and that's called separating. So we first rinse them under the tap, then we don't have any visible dirt on them, then we can soak. Because if it's invisible stuff or very tiny speckles of stuff that remains on, you still want to soak it to make sure everything goes away, that's okay. But you mustn't do that on Shabbat if you're doing lettuce that is the normal lettuce, not the one that grows without bugs. The one that's grown without bugs, that's the only one you can wash and soak on Shabbat. The ones that don't have that halachic stamp on them that they grew without, they were grown in a process that doesn't have bugs, you mustn't wash and you mustn't soak on Shabbat because there ought to be bugs there. By the way, in general, much more mehadrin and much more preferable to buy only Levi products that grew without bugs. They were grown in the process without bugs. Because it's very difficult to clean otherwise. And we know that definitely in the past generations, our mothers or grandmothers did the cleaning, no question. I used to do it myself. When I was single in my parents' home, I used to prepare the lettuce for Leila Seder. There's a huge amount of lettuce from Maror. And I used to sit one by one, washing them, soaking them, looking at each and every leaf separately to the sun to see that it's all clean. There's a whole long process. Today, we can easily buy the ones that are called Gush Katif in general, but it's all kinds of companies. They grow them without bugs. Much better. Still, the package says you have to soak them for 3 minutes in soap and water. So you do that as well, but then it's much easier to take care of. And on Shabbat, it's allowed because most probably there aren't any bugs there. And if there were, it's called a nomit kaven. You didn't intend on killing the bug. And since there wasn't 100% probability that there should be bugs in that package, therefore it's considered nomit kaven, unintentional, and it's allowed to do. But if it's a type Yeah.
Sorry, what about the power washed ones that you buy that have already been pre-washed? The problem I find when I spoke to somebody who used to live in Gush, she said the amount of pesticide they use not to have the bugs is so unhealthy. Even after washing those lettuce, they have been tested apparently that there is absolutely ridiculous amount of pesticides still on it, even after soaking it. So she's a little bit of my kind of rabbanut here. She's very into, she used to live there, so she's my sort of the person to speak to. But I was wondering, I mean, that's why I kind of afraid to buy anything from there. But what about all these that you buy prepackaged, power washed and cleaned, which have never ever had any bugs in? But versus obviously buying just the supermarket ones, they're literally, or shook ones, they were just plucked out the ground, and you definitely will come across things.
Yeah, those are definitely fine bugs. They're right. So those you can't wash and soak on Shabbat because it's psik reisha. It would have to be that you're killing a bug, and killing a bug is the right level of netilat neshama. It's a melacha. Yeah, so those you can't use for sure on Shabbat. The pre-washed, power-washed ones, I'm not sure because these bugs that we're talking about aren't necessarily visible to a naked eye without carefully inspecting them, because they sometimes are tiny and they are the color of the leaf, or sometimes even see-through ones. True that we don't care for any bug that we can't see unless we use a microscope. That we don't care about at all. That's not halachically forbidden. That's fine. But we're talking about here, visible, but only visible to a very thorough, inspected very thoroughly. Only then do you see them crawling or walking there. So that's the problem. And those only the ones that grow in this process of a no bug process, then only then can you be quite sure that there aren't such bugs there. Otherwise, it's not a sure thing. Could be that the power washed ones get rid of all those bugs, even those tiny ones can barely be seen, but can be seen with the naked eye. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I can find out there's a organization called Kosharot, who are of the Tzilumi world, and they take care of all these issues. So I can send a question to them and ask if those are considered clean enough from bugs that can be used from the bug point of view.
Right, but you also, obviously, chutz la'aretz, nobody have the luxury of having gush lettuce. Everybody on Shabbat uses lettuce they can buy in the supermarket, and prepare their salads accordingly. So I understand that living in Israel, having this opportunity is preferential to use, but surely it's not totally forbidden to use.
Right, but they do their preparation for these leaves before Shabbat, I assume. They clean them away before Shabbat.
No, living chutz la'aretz.
During Shabbat,
you would rinse your lettuce. Again, you'll buy the lettuce that are usually pre-washed and cleaned. It's, it's just generally nobody nowadays wants to see a bug and then eat lettuce thinking there was a bug crawling along those lettuce. So it's everybody we're very disposable kind of a generation. We like everything done for us, and us just open our mouth and consume it.
Right. So I would have to look, Bli Neder, I'll check this question. I'll send an email, Bli Neder, with the answer about using power washed lettuce or any Levi product regarding the bugs situation in that case. And then, so then maybe that could be a good solution to use generally even weekdays. We're not talking about only Shabbat. This has to do with kashrus unrelated to Shabbat. Besides that, you have the issue of soaking or washing the lettuce on Shabbat, and that's allowed providing there isn't a 100% sure situation of bugs in the lettuce that you're washing. So Bli Neder, I'll look this up for next week, but it's very interesting.
So you have to be 100% sure, or
no, you have to be 100% sure that it's not 100% sure that there's a bug. Meaning, those lettuces that grow from the ground and that are not taken care of at all, and you buy them as a whole head of lettuce, those are 100% certain that there are bugs in them. No question. And therefore, you must eat them on Shabbat. But those that are grown especially with no bug situation, or maybe also the power wash ones that are most likely
they come in a box and they're, like you pay more for that. They some of that they haven't got they're not like gush katif ones. They're not with the hechsher, but they've got like you said, the power washed, whatever.
Right, the power wash ones. So those, even if it's a 5% chance that there are no bugs, and 91% there are, that's enough to allow you to clean them on Shabbat. Only if it's 100% sure that there are bugs, that's psik reisha. That's a case where even though you're not intending on killing any bug and you prefer there would be no bugs there, but since it's 100% certain that there are bugs, you can't sneak away and say, I'm washing this because I want it clean. I'm not caring I don't care for killing bugs. I don't care. I wish there were no bugs. You can't hide away from the situation. That's called psik reisha, and you mustn't wash it. But the power wash ones seem to me, as Leah was saying before, that they're quite clean. And even if there is a chance that here and there may be a bug left over, it won't matter, because then you can say, that wasn't my intent. My intent was just to wash it away from dirt, and I wasn't intending on killing a bug, and that's okay. That's called Yinomit Kaven, and that's allowed. Only if it's 100% certain that there are bugs, and no matter what you do, you're going to kill a bug, then it's not allowed. So I would think that the power wash ones, at least from the point of view of Hilchot Shabbat, can be washed and soaked on Shabbat. But my question is, can they be cleaned out thoroughly and well without those teeny bugs crawling around that would not be there if there were the ones that were grown by a hechsher way that get rid of all those as well? That's what I have to find out really if they can be used even on weekdays without special inspection. Very careful inspection. I have to check how that works from that point of view. From point of view of Shabbat, it should be okay to be able to wash them well and soak them well, and maybe even check for bugs. I have to find out from the bug point of view if they're clean of bugs the moment you soak them, or they still need special inspection like you would need for the old type in the old days. Okay, very good. So we'll stop at this. Thank you. It's very good cheer because we got to a new issue, new chiddush that I myself wasn't aware of, the cleaning up, tidying up of games after being hosted or hosting people. That's something I have to be aware of. And like Leah said, the best solution would be to spread them away from each other and then clean them up thoroughly, clean the room up thoroughly. Okay, so have a great remaining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
See you or hear you next week. Okay, call 2. Bye-bye.